But I thought this morning, last night I was preparing a completely different message, and I remembered it was Mother's Day. Kathy reminded me it was Mother's Day. And I thought, wow, I should really preach on Jesus, the founder of the original women's liberation movement. And so this morning I'm going to share with you the short version of that. You know, in Genesis chapter 1, God wrote this through Moses. Then the Lord said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky." I don't know how you rule fish, but I just think this is just amazing. Come, fish, bite now. Bird, no poop zone. You know, it's over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing. Come on, you know we have power over creeps. Over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. And God created man in his own image. Get this. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. How many of you know that when God created man, the word man, Adam, he created them male and female. He told them both to subdue the earth. It's important to realize that God is not male. God is both male and female. If you oppress women, you miss half the revelation of God, because God had to create in his image man, both male and female, to properly represent the nature of God. You know that when Adam and Eve fell in the garden, that the curse over Adam, of course, is that you're going to till the ground, but it's going to yield thorns and thistles. The curse over the woman was you're going to have pain in childbirth, and your husband will rule over you. By the way, it's very important to realize that God did not say, "and every man will rule over every woman." That was a modern translation that was not in the Bible. He said, "Your husband will rule over you." Before Adam and Eve fell, they co-reigned. In fact, if you don't think the woman was powerful, you just have to think through, who did the devil go to in the garden? The woman. Who did Adam listen to? The woman. Who was leading in the garden? I'd propose to you that the woman had the most influence in the garden. At least she talked Adam out of listening to God. But now she talks us into listening to God, which is an awesome redemptive story. And so the Old Covenant, the Old Testament, what we call the Old Testament, had 212 commandments. Now, obviously there was the 10 commandments, but if you added up all the Levitical laws, all the Levitical rules, the laws that God handed down to Moses about the tabernacle and so forth, all of those add up to 212. Now, in the years of silence between Malachi and Matthew, there arose another religion called Judaism. Judaism, to my amazement, is not the Old Covenant. I didn't know that. You don't see Pharisees in the Old Testament. You see scribes, but they had a different role. You don't see Sadducees in the Old Testament. Out of the Old Covenant came a new religion called Judaism. When Jesus walked the earth, he did not walk in what we would call Old Testament. He didn't walk in Old Testament Mosaic law. He actually walked in what was called Judaism. And I just told you the Old Testament had 212 commandments, laws, if you will. The Judaism had 617. They added 400 new laws between Malachi and Matthew, and almost 100 of those laws were to disempower women. Almost 100 of those extra rules disempowered women. Let me just read you this, a little bit of the history. In first century Israel, there was no people group more oppressed than women. They were considered second-class citizens akin to slaves. They had virtually no rights, no respect, and no voice. They were the property of men. They were allowed little or no formal education. If a family had young boys and girls, the boys went off to school to be educated, while the girls stayed home with their mother. Like the woman of Afghanistan before the American invasion, Jewish women were forbidden to speak to men in public and were required to veil their faces whenever they left their homes. If a woman was caught unveiled in public, it was grounds for divorce. They kept house, they took care of their children, and they served at the will of their husbands. If a man came over the house for dinner, the woman had to eat in another room. Their fathers arranged most of their marriages, so they rarely married the man of their dreams. The best they could hope for is for someone who treated them better than their fathers. They made, to make matters worse, their husbands were allowed to marry many wives. So most wives shared their husbands with other wives. If their husbands got tired of them for most any reason, they divorced them, discarded them like used rags. Jewish women couldn't vote. In fact, they had no political influence whatsoever. A woman couldn't even be a witness in a court case. Judaism was stricter than the Old Testament law with respect to women. Women were relegated to the outer court. There was 4 levels to the inner court. They were relegated to the outer court. Women were relegated to the outer court of the synagogue and were most often not allowed to read the scriptures called the Torah. One first-century rabbi, who was actually the most famous of that time, named Elzer, said this: "I'd rather the words of the Torah be burned than entrusted or taught to a woman." His comments depict the religious community's attitude towards women of the time. In fact, women were not allowed to recite the morning prayers, nor prayers at meals. And so this is the culture that Jesus emerged in. When Jesus walked the earth, women were not just second-class citizens, they were possessions. Women were not allowed to be taught the scriptures. It was illegal to teach women scriptures. And so Jesus arrives on the scene, and let's turn to Luke chapter 10, verse 38. Jesus comes to Martha and Mary's house, and it says this: "Now, as they were traveling along, he," speaking of Jesus and his disciples, "entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. She had a sister called Mary, who was seated at the Lord's feet listening to his word. But Martha was distracted with all kinds of preparations. And she said to Jesus, 'Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to do all the serving alone? Then tell her to help me.' But the Lord answered and said, 'Martha, Martha, you're worried and bothered about so many things. But only one thing is necessary. For Mary has chosen the good part, which will not be taken away from her.'" I want you to get a picture of what's happening here, and we have so little time to do this. But Pharisees, scribes, Sadducees did not teach women. They did not value women. Jesus is in the home of Mary and Martha. Mary's sitting at his feet. Martha is doing what Judaism taught women to do for 400 years. You don't get taught. You serve men. And she's in the kitchen preparing, and Mary is sitting at his feet, and Jesus is teaching her. And Martha is a dominant personality, external processor, black and white woman. And she's mad. And she says to her guest, "Jesus, do you not care that I'm doing all the work?" And Jesus said, "Martha, Mary's chose the better thing." And Jesus isn't saying to Martha, "Martha, I value lazy people. I have no value for hospitality and hard work. Mary's chose the better thing. She's doing nothing. And that's really my value system." No. He's saying to Martha, "Martha, I didn't come to your house for a free meal. I know the Pharisees taught you that. I know the Sadducees taught you that. I didn't come here for you to serve me. I've come here to serve you. Sit at my feet. Mary has chose the better thing. I've come to teach you." That's a profound statement in the context of Judaism. I've come to teach you. In John 11, it's the story of Lazarus, and I want to read you this story. I love this story. "Now a certain man was sick, Lazarus of Bethany." Listen to this: "the village of Mary and his sister Martha." Who did Jesus acknowledge the village was? It was Mary and Martha's village. Did you get that? We're going to Lazarus. We're going to see Lazarus at Mary and Martha's village. Radical statement. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. So the sisters sent word to him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom you love is sick. And when Jesus heard this, he said, this sickness is not to end in death, but for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified. Now Jesus loved Martha. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard, because he loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, so when he heard he was sick, he stayed 2 days longer. Jesus is my friend. He made sure I died. So I'm sure Martha was like, with friends like you. Then after this, he said to the disciples, let's go to Judea. And so Jesus goes on, verse 17. So when Jesus came, he found that he'd already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews who had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. And, I don't know, I read that wrong. But anyway, Martha, therefore, when she heard that Jesus was coming, went out to meet him. But Mary stayed at home. And Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Now, I want you to understand what's happening here. Jesus, it's 2 days' journey to the place that Jesus is at, to the place where Lazarus is at. Jesus waits 2 days before he leaves, so he's 2 days late. Martha figures out that she sends Jesus a word, hey, Lazarus is sick, come and help him. She figures out that Jesus waits 2 extra days. So she finds out Jesus is on the way, and she marches out 2 miles to meet him. She's not in a good mood. This is Martha. She is not in a good mood. And she meets Jesus, and she says to him, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. You know, it's the, tell my sister to help me. If you had been here, my brother would not have died. She's angry because she knows he stalled. And she goes on to say, even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. And she's saying to him, you can clean up this mess. But you made a mess here. You should have been here 2 days ago. She's scolding him. Now I know God listens to you, so you can clean this up. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. And Martha's still upset. She says to him, I know he'll rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even if he dies. And everyone who lives, believes in me, and who believes in me will never die. Do you believe this? Listen to this. She said to him, yes, Lord, I have believed, past tense, I have believed that you are the Christ, the Son of God, even he who comes into the world. Now, where did she get that? How did she know that she said, I have believed. In other words, you taught me this. When you said, Mary chose the better thing, I sat at your feet and you taught me about the resurrection. I know there's a coming resurrection. And Jesus said, listen, baby, I got another revelation for you. There isn't just a coming resurrection. I taught you that when you sat at Mary's feet with me. But there's another resurrection that you don't know about. And that's me. I am the resurrection and the life. And listen to this. When she said this, she went away and called Mary, her sister, saying secretly, listen to this, saying secretly, the teacher is here and he's calling for you. Did you notice she didn't say the master? Did you notice she didn't say the Lord? Oh, you're not even getting this. This is a revelation. She says, the teacher is here. The rabbi who isn't supposed to teach women. Secretly, I want you to know, the teacher is here. And he's calling for you. The teacher is here. He's calling for you. And when she heard it, she got up quickly and she is coming to him.
Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but he was still in the place where Martha had met him. Then the Jews who were with her in the house and consoling her, when they saw that Mary got up quickly and went out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep. Therefore, when Mary came where Jesus was, she saw him, and she fell at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was moved in spirit and was troubled. He was moved in spirit and troubled, and said, where do you lay him? And they said to him, Lord, come and see. Jesus wept. Jesus wept. Now Martha is mad. Martha has a theological problem because Jesus taught her this, and this other thing happened. And she's not in a good mood. And she knows that Jesus stalled, which really ticked her off. Mary doesn't respond like that anywhere in the Bible. Mary just cries about everything. Mary says the same thing. She says, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. She's not saying, listen, I have a theological problem about what you taught us at the house that day, and this ain't supposed to happen. Jesus doesn't respond to her theologically because she's not making a theological, she's not asking a theological question. She doesn't have a theological problem. She just wants her brother to be alive. And when Jesus sees Mary weeping, it says he's troubled in spirit. Now, does Jesus know he's going to raise Lazarus? Yeah, he said it 4 days before. This isn't on to death. I'm going to raise the guy. No worries. He's going to raise Lazarus in about 10 minutes. But it says, when he saw where they laid him, it says that he turned and he wept. Have you ever thought that? I'm like, dude, this is irrational. Why don't you go, hey, Mary, chill. I'm about to do a miracle here. Here I am, the Christ, the Son of the living God. Do you believe that? No. What's he do? He weeps. Do you understand why he weeps? He's not weeping because he doesn't know he's going to raise Lazarus. He's weeping because he's showing value for women. And he's saying to the Spock-like Vulcan culture, I can weep with you. Listen, I value your, do you understand this? I value your passion. He knows he's going to raise him from the dead, but he's saying to Mary, I understand. Martha, I know how to connect with you. I understand when there's a theological issue and I've taught you one thing, another thing happens. I value the fact that you will argue for justice. But Mary, I connect with you too. I understand that when you're brokenhearted, you don't want a theological answer. You just want someone who will weep with you. Later on, they're having a party. Lazarus rose from the dead. And, John chapter 12, verse 1, Jesus goes after the Passover to Bethany, came to Bethany where Lazarus was, and they're having dinner. And guess what Martha's doing? Martha. Okay, this is a dinner. Jesus is coming. What's Martha doing? Martha, she's right. You're right. She's serving. She's serving. Just like, remember, Jesus rebuked her the first time? She's still doing it. She's still serving. Reminds you, Kathy Vallotton. You come to our house, you're going to have a conversation with Kathy while she's working. She's serving. Jesus doesn't rebuke her this time. And in walks and Lazarus. What's Lazarus doing? Eating. Guys, can I hear an amen? Amen. In walks Mary. And what is Mary doing when she gets to the house? Yes, you're right. She's crying. She's weeping, and she has an alabaster vial of costly perfume, 1 year's wages. What, $50,000, $60,000 worth of wages? How many know if you're hanging out with people that their perfume costs $60,000? Those are pretty wealthy people. And she takes the vial of perfume, and she begins to pour it over the head of Jesus. Now, I know Judas takes the rap for all of this because he wants to take the money that this could have been sold for and give it to the poor. But you'll notice that the Bible makes reference to the fact that all the disciples complained this could have been taken, this perfume could have been sold and given to ranchos niños. That's the way a guy thinks, right? This is such a waste. And Jesus, knowing their disdain, turns to the boys and says, what this woman did will be recorded, will be repeated everywhere this gospel is preached. The connotation is what you did won't. But what she did will. In other words, Jesus is saying to the men, this is what you've lacked for 400 years. This is what you planned out of your services. This is what you planned out of your life. This passion I love. Everywhere the gospel preached, I will tell about this woman who wasted herself on me. You couldn't put a price on it, but I think it was better than what you did. Jesus told 3 parables to the Pharisees and scribes who were complaining that Jesus reached out to sinners and treated them with respect. This is in Luke 15. I'll just tell you them very quickly. You'll know them as soon as I tell you them. He told them 3 parables in response to the fact that he was reaching out to sinners. The first one was the parable of the 99 sheep and one got lost. Do you remember that? And in the parable, the 99 represented the righteous, right? Who the Pharisees thought they were. And the one represented the one they were complaining about, right? And the shepherd who went out after them, who did he represent? God. He's saying to the Pharisees, God goes out after the sheep just like your shepherds do, right? And the last, I understand there's one in the middle, the last parable he told them was what we call the prodigal son, who had a father. A father had 2 sons. You remember this story? And there was one older son who worked all the time, and the one younger son took his inheritance, spent it on prostitutes, and then headed back for the farm. Remember this story? The father runs out in the field and meets the one son who spent his money on prostitutes. Now, in the story, who is the son who thinks he's righteous because he works so hard? The Pharisees. Who is the son who spent his money on prostitutes and is heading home? The sinner they're complaining about. And who is the father who ran out in the field to meet him? God. Okay, what's the middle parable? The woman who lost a coin. Who's the lost treasure? The sinners. Who's the woman in the parable who's looking for the lost coin? God. He just told the Pharisees, and God is like a woman who lost a valuable treasure. And you didn't get it, but they did. That's why they hated him. Because he said, you lost the feminine side of God. God is not just male, he is male and female. God's like a woman looking for a treasure. When she loses it, she goes after it. When she finds it, she calls all of her friends and they rejoice. And God is the woman in the parable. I want to just finish with this. At the resurrection, the crucifixion and resurrection, it was a man who betrayed Jesus and male soldiers who arrested him. It was Caiaphas the high priest and the scribes and elders who accused him. They were all men. It was Pilate, the governor, and Herod, the king, who judged him, all men. It was Roman soldiers that beat him, while a Roman centurion ordered him to be nailed to the cross, all men. It was a male prisoner who cursed him. It was a male soldiers who gambled for his garments, all men. It was male guards who entombed him, and it was male disciples who denied him. At the resurrection, it was a woman at Simon's house who poured expensive perfume on his body before the resurrection to prepare him for burial. It was Pilate's wife who God had given a dream, and she tried to convince her husband to release him, a woman. It was his mother Mary, the wife of Caiaphas, and Mary Magdalene that stayed with him through the dark night of the soul on the cross. And there were only 2 women there the day of the funeral, and there was just one faithful grieving saint there to celebrate him when he beat sin, death, hell, and the grave. And you guessed it, it was a woman. And when Jesus told her, go tell my disciples I'm alive, she went and told 11 disciples that he was alive. How many even came to the tomb to check it out? Only 2, Peter and John. And when they went back, most of the disciples still didn't believe. And what I'm getting at is this: it was women who believed first. It was women who told the story first. It was women who got the deepest revelation about the resurrection. It was the women that got the deepest, it was the woman at the well that got the deepest revelation about worship. It was Jesus teaching women, and the deepest revelations in the scripture taught by Jesus were taught to women. Happy Mother's Day.